Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to tonight's webinar, How to Shoot for Fashion and Boudoir with John Denton. I'm Boris Bergman from Data Color, and I'd like to welcome you to this webinar. Tonight it will be John, Richard, and me who will perform this webinar. We are very sorry, it's a live situation, and a little technical problem occurred on John's computer. So we are going to fix this, and due to the reason we have a shared presentation tonight from John and Richard, we will start with Richard's part first, and I will take care on John's computer, and we will arrange everything so he can take over. So, sorry for this little delay in the start here of the webinar. I hope you will enjoy it. And I will hand you over now to Richard. Richard, it's you now to share your screen with us. And therefore, I'll promote you to be moderator now. Please do so.
Cool. Thanks, Boris. Hi, folks. Good evening. Apologies for the late start, but hopefully we'll get John up and running very shortly. I'm leaving Boris and John to tackle with that over the airwaves in the background whilst we run through what we're going to be showing you tonight. Now, obviously, John's going to be, when we get him online, he's going to be running through the joys of his life as a fashion boudoir and a life photographer. Now, as part of that, obviously, we come up with some very similar issues across whatever the photographic style is that you guys and myself use. Basically, there's some common issues, some common areas. We were going to leave this until the end of the session, but we'll take this at the start. Basically, we'll look at ways in which we can help fix you from a workflow point of view and a color point of view first of all. So we'll get into the technique with John as we get him online shortly, but I'm going to start off with essentially what is a perennial problem for all of us, basically, and that's the joys of having some sort of frame of reference. Now, whether you're doing studio photography, boudoir photography, or location photography, basically. One of the key things that can be a problem is knowing when you've taken a photograph. Obviously, I've got a very simple example here of some leaves on a background, but it makes the point, basically, that when I've taken this, I don't know whether my particular subject here is is that a true representation of the colors as I shot it? Is it something here that is sort of greeny, yellowy leaves on a cream background? And the same thing, of course, in the realms of boudoir, relevant to skin tone as well and clothing. Have I got any casts that have been applied to my images? Because ultimately, I could go in here and I could start retouching, and I could end up thinking, okay, well, maybe I've got some cream background here, so I'll wash that out. I'll set my white point to the background, and in retouching and working on the images that way, actually that could wash out my leaves or my skin tones, whatever the subject is, as I say. So therefore, this is something we want to try and avoid, basically, as far as the joys of our workflow is concerned. And of course, we could go the other way as well. We could think that, okay, we'll take our contrast here and maybe we'll start playing around with it and really muck the image up, basically. So obviously, the key thing we want to do is have some form of frame of reference that allows us to be able to say, okay, with surety, okay, I've shot this, and this particular model in this particular setting with these clothes and this background and so on, and this is actually a true representation of the colors in that environment. Now, of course, a lot of us in the past would have been carrying around a grey card for doing this, basically. Now, grey cards are great because they give you that point of reference. They give you some tonality there, some greys and some whites that you can actually set this balance with. But they come with some inherent problems. Firstly, you have to angle them correctly in order to catch the light correctly, such that basically you get a true reading for the relevant greys and tonality that you're seeing on a grey card. And secondly, whether they're a solid grey card or whether they're a cloth one, which some of them pop out and fold out, they can be a bit of a pain, basically, because they can get mucked up, and in the case of the foldable, collapsible ones, they can get marked, and generally speaking, really look worse for wear. So as soon as they start becoming stained and aged, they're no good to you. So what we've got as a real simple tool to start getting you in control of any form of photography But in particular, when you're starting to look into the realms of, as I say, skin tones and getting relevant clothing, etc., captured correctly, we have something called a cube. It's a SpyderCube, basically, from Datacolor, and it's a little tool that is, it's about, I suppose, 4 centimeters along a side. It is cubic, and we're showing you a picture of it here on the slide, but I'll take you into Photoshop in a minute. We'll show you how you can actually use this to set white balance and grey balance and get your contrast right. And this, very pocketable little solution, I say, is cubic, but it's a solid cube. It's solid plastic, resin plastic, and essentially what you've got is something that allows you to drop this very easily into your shots at some point. So whatever the shoot is, whether it's in a studio or whether it's on location or whether it's outside, as you can see here, in fact, if I pop out of the slideware so you don't have to look at just slideware all night, we'll pop into Photoshop, and in fact I've got the image here open in Camera Raw because it's useful to see how it works in, or how some of the solutions we're talking about work in different environments. And essentially what Camera Raw is looking at here is the cube, as you can see it. Now you can see probably more clearly here that this is actually hanging from the leaves I was taking a shot of here, and that's because it comes with a nice little sort of hanging hook on it, basically, or rubberized bit of nylon on the top here. At the bottom of the cube, you've actually got a tripod mount or a lighting stand mount, so you've actually got a screw thread in there. So either way, whether it's just popping it into the scene or popping it into your studio shots, or whether it's actually popping it onto a tripod or hanging it in there, or perhaps getting your models to hold this at some point in your shoot, or maybe before or after the shoot. As long as it's in the lighting conditions that you're actually going to be working in, then great. You've now got something which you know is a frame of reference, as opposed to trying to guess, hey, was my model's skin looking, so slightly tanned? Was she pale and interesting? Were the clothes really vibrant, or were they, particularly washed out? And maybe something that's particularly relevant in a fashion environment where you're trying to capture true colors as far as fashion is concerned. Then this is giving you an instant frame of reference. And what we've got here, and just to give you a little tour around Camera Raw here, up the top right-hand corner, you've got a histogram. Now this is a graph, but don't be scared. It's nothing particularly to worry about. Essentially, what you've got here is, as you can see, as a slope or an increasing slope of information here. What it's telling us, on the right-hand side, we have all the highlight information, i.e. the light parts of your image. And on the left-hand side, we've got the shadow end of things. So what we're seeing here is very much, okay, how your images are made up. And to be honest, looking at the screen, you can see straight away, well, it's probably burnt out. It's probably overexposed here. Now, I've turned on my outer gamut warnings. And if I just hold over that top white triangle on the top right-hand corner of the histogram, there you see it actually comes up with the name highlight out of clipping or clipping weight warning, basically. So if I turn that off, you can see what happens on the screen there is it's taken off that little red identifier, because, yeah, don't worry, they're not actually colored red. These are the white triangles here. The two here are actually our white point, if you like, that we're trying to aim for. We've also got a silvery ball on top of this, and don't forget, we're talking about a three-dimensional device here, so a three-dimensional little guide. Now the ball has like a silvery chrome effect to it, so therefore it is set to have, it's a white trap, or an outer gamut trap. So anything that's 100% white, we should be seeing here. So when we click on that little white triangle, what we're getting there is that outer gamut, because you can see that there's red there, so that's warning us that, okay, we've got over 100% white there. But unfortunately, we've also got it here on this white triangle. Now, what we're trying to be able to see, or what we should be able to see here, if this cube is actually exposed correctly, this should be actually not red. It should show some image, basically. It should have a white area there. And what we're trying to do is make sure that if you print out, or wherever you send your images to, you don't send images and then, for instance, if you're doing this in an album or spending a lot of money on printing out your shots, suddenly, if you'd overexposed, you'd get zero image area in any of these areas. And of course, this has repercussions on anything that's white, for instance. So let's say I've got, a classic example is within, sort of fashion photography, we've got a lot of white gowns and so on. Instantly here, if you've got burnout in this area, you're probably going to lose a lot of detail from those white gowns. Not a lot you can do about it, basically, is there? But one of the other things we're seeing here at the moment is this side here with the red outer gamut warning is overexposed, whereas the other side here isn't. And actually, these two sides are exactly the same, basically. And it's only because we've got this three-dimensional aspect here. What we're actually seeing is that the left-hand side is being more overexposed than the right-hand side because it's three-dimensional. So this little black ring here is actually a hole, and that's essentially our outer gamut shadow end of things. And we can see at the moment from the graph there is really very little shadow information down here. This left-hand side, where we've got an equivalent blue outer gamut warning, there is nothing that's 100% black here or anywhere near it. So we know at the moment we've got a really overexposed shot. We know that anything that should be sort of nice, dark, shadowy actually is coming out too overblown, and we're seeing, some noise in there. So we'd either have to address the noise, or more importantly, what we're going to do is correct the exposure and correct the contrast. But first of all, what we're going to do is a simple three-stage process. Enough of the background to this. What we're going to do is we're going to go up to our little white balance tool here, click on that, and just drag that onto the side of our cube here that's overexposed. So whichever has got the outer gamut warning, whichever is lighter, that's the side we're going to use to set our grey balance, our grey point. Instantly I click on that, you can see that that's first of all given a bit of a removal of tone there, so hopefully you've all been able to see that. I'll just undo that, so you can see there we were originally. So we've got the white balance tool still chosen. Click on that left hand side there, and you can see it's instantly taken out that cast. So there was a cast there. We know that was the case now. So we know these are known values basically, and we're now seeing that, okay, this background, it wasn't white, it wasn't cream, it's sort of grey basically. But it has obviously adjusted the coloration and the cast we've been getting in this case in the leaves. But of course, yeah, stretching that analogy, if it was to a model, if it was to whatever it is you're trying to take a photograph of, suddenly you've removed that overall cast from things. And now what we're going to do is the other two parts of this. We just need to drop down our exposure slider here, so that we actually get that red outer gamut area here on the white triangle disappearing. So I'm just going to drop that down basically, and until we get that just completely out of there. Now we can see there, firstly, at the top here, you should be able to see that the histogram, top right-hand corner, is now far more spread out. And that's really what we want to aim for. We actually want to get a far more even spread of image information here, such that you've actually got something that isn't either too dark, too light, etc., etc. So that's a far more healthy looking histogram up there for those people who like looking at graphs. For me, I like to see that, okay, I've actually got some information, got some image data here in my white patch here. I mean, I could measure that, but to be perfectly honest, I now know that as soon as it's dropped down below that outer gamut area, it's going to be about right as far as that highlight end is concerned. But I have still got that catch light here in this ball, which is great because it still allows me to, if I have got any glints off anything that is, aluminium or chrome, etc., etc., then great, I'm leaving that in my shoot, so I'm still getting that nice little burst of light where I need it. The only thing that we haven't done is address this bottom end, the shadow, the dark end of things particularly well at the moment, because as mentioned, this little round black ring here is actually a hole, and that is essentially going to be your outer gamut black area. So in the same way that we should only get this little red outer gamut area on the ball here at the highlight end, what we should get here is basically a blue outer gamut warning within that hole and nowhere else. So we're going to adjust the contrast now by just dropping down the black slider. Now I'm using, as I say, Adobe Camera Raw here as part of Photoshop, but anything basically where you're able to adjust your exposure and your blacks or your shadow detail can be used in this environment. So things like Lightroom obviously work very similar to this, and a lot of the other packages. So we're not talking something that's inherently built into a particular software here. And as we've got to this range here now, we've started to get that filling in now. We now know that we've actually got pretty much the right range. And again, having a look at that histogram, you're seeing that you're just getting that right clipping there. Now, in this instance, we were sort of starting from an overexposed image, and actually that's a better scenario than starting from an underexposed image, because for those of you who shoot in RAW, you'll know that, okay, overexpose it, you're still getting the information in there, you can take it out. If you underexpose things, you really are losing data, basically. You're not getting any data in your images in the first place in the underexposed areas. So here we're being able to drop that down and get our what is essentially, this is a 4% black around this ring. So that's getting to the right level now. And the grays here, these are 18% grays, but of course one of them is looking darker than the other because essentially you've got a exposure coming in from the left-hand side here. And the whites are a 96% white. So basically we're getting that white, grey and black area, the correct level. We're getting the right outer gamut areas for our, our real shadow area and so on. And so one of the key things about not having too much down in the shadow end, especially when you're going into printing images, is you don't want to fill in all that dark shadow with over black because you're wasting ink. You'll end up paying more for it, whether it's you printing it or somebody else is printing it. So therefore, you really want to make sure, in particular at that shadow end, you're only getting that 100% in that hole and nowhere else. And that really will reduce that ink wastage as well, as far as your images are concerned. Now, key thing here within Camera Raw, something you'll see again in one of the other tools for, in particular the boudoir and studio photography aspect of what we're talking about tonight, is you can actually go in here and you can save these readings now for this particular image of the cube here, and then you can actually apply that again and again basically to your images. So therefore it's something that you can actually stamp and cookie cut onto multiple images, but of course only if they're taken in the same. By the way, you may notice there's an SWPP listing there under the presets. We're very proud to be working in association with the SWPP, the Society of Wedding and Portrait Photographers here in the UK and across various different countries. I highly recommend them as a society for really keeping you up to date with a lot of the best things that are going on in photography. They have a great convention every year in London in January, and this year they're actually running a show in Birmingham in October. I think it's 3rd through the 5th of October, and essentially giving you a chance, for those of you who aren't London-based, if you are in the UK and further north, you can come down and see a lot of the wedding and studio photographers that really are artisans of their art, and of course we'll be involved in that show or those shows as well. So hopefully we'll see one of those settings basically around the country. But anyway, as I say, that was a slight aside as I saw the name pop up there, just to remind me to tell you that essentially you can create these presets and stamp those into your images time and time again. So it really gives you this control of what you're doing. So essentially I can get from this random situation where I don't really know what's going on with my colors and my tonality and contrast of my image, back to a situation where actually no, I'm good now. I actually know I've got some frame of reference, and because it's pocketable, that's great. The other key thing I mentioned about grey cards, A, they're bulky, B, you've got to angle them correctly. With this cube, as you can see, because it's cubic and because you're getting one side lighter than the other, the cubic side of things actually helps you here. So as long as that hole is pointing towards you, that black trap, then one of those two sides with the grey and white triangles on is going to be hitting somewhere to around 45 degrees to the incumbent light. And that's exactly what you want to be doing. That's what you would be doing with a grey card. But here, the faffing around of having to angle it correctly is taken out of the scenario for you. You can just basically use the grey card for, or the cube for that grey card purpose and not have to worry about it because it's instantly angling it correctly. So that's giving you a little bit of a background to the cube. Let's just pop out of here for a second and see if we've got anywhere with our friend Mr. Denton. It looks like we're still not there yet. I'm afraid he's having some serious issues with his computer there at the moment. But let's pop into to just give you a little bit more of background information about the cube. It is solid, as I say, and on that basis of having to worry about, oh, does it get mucked up and so on, it's scratch resistant. It's die hard. That sounds like a film, doesn't it? Resin dyed plastic that is impregnated all the way through the color. So the 18% gray at the top there stays 18% gray whether you scratch it or whether you don't. So you're talking about something that is going to last you a very long time. For myself, I keep one with me in my jacket pocket all the time because you never know whether you're going to get that perfect shot that there's some instance just presents itself to you, and you need to drag this out and just shoot it just after you've taken that important shot, obviously. And then you've got that frame of reference for how the lighting was on the day of your photograph. Top tip though, if you are keeping it in your pocket, if you happen to be one of the people out there that washes their clothes, I gather there are some, then basically this gives you the opportunity to effectively ruin your cube, basically, because over time, because detergents in clothes actually contain a bleaching agent, they'll actually bleach out what you're doing with your cube. So they'll actually reduce the color settings, so that 4% black won't be a 4% anymore, it'll be slightly lighter, etc., etc. So top tip, it comes in a little bag. Keep it in the little bag, basically, when you're working with that, as far as out there in the field is concerned. So that's part of the range, as I say, of things that we like to, give you tips and tricks for in that studio, boudoir, and fashion environment, and to be perfectly honest, in any other environment as well. Not so relevant perhaps in the landscape side of things, because that tends to be more down to your own perception and how you want things to look. Saying that, actually, it's still good to have that frame of reference in there from a contrast point of view as well. So let's have a look at one of the things that really, in that fashion environment, though, becomes a very, very powerful tool. And let's present you with the problem first. Now, the problem here becomes a bit more obvious. I mean, in this instance, actually, I think this was a wedding. To be honest, I know it was a wedding, but it's similar sort of style of fashion photography here to make the point. What we've got here, basically, is a selection of images that have essentially got a cast to them, or in fact multiple casts. Because anywhere where you are shooting with multiple lighting conditions or with multiple cameras, then you can get some differences in lighting, differences in end results. You can say, take a shot of the same subject in multiple times and it looks different. And of course, that's not great, is it? Because you end up with something that looks unprofessional, a hodgepodge of colors for the same thing. And classically in weddings, you've got 3 or 4 different lighting conditions, perhaps in a church, in a reception, outside, and maybe later on in the evening. So the key thing here, you could use a cube to try and get around some of this, but in weddings, we want to be able to get to this more sort of straightforward, everything looks the same, cast remove situation. But also in the studio environment as well, different lighting conditions can cause problems. So we want to go from that situation where, well, you're thinking you've taken something correctly, but now we know we've taken it correctly. And when you start getting into the joys of pack photography, product photography as well, you really need to get that absolutely spot on. So this is where we've got something here. It's the big brother, if you like, of the cube, and this is called a SpyderChecker. So this is a color chart which allows you to correctly set the entire color circle, the entire gamut of colors that you're working with in your environment. So basically, it suddenly puts you in control. You're not just taking out a cast, you're able to set the correct colors, because you've got 48 colors here that you can actually use to effectively really set spot on not only that contrast range that you've already seen us do, but also every color. So if I need to get that skin tone correct, I can get it absolutely spot on. So again, let's have a little pop out of here. Let's just see how we're doing in this this environment as far as setting our color control in our studio environment is concerned. And I'm going to pop into, for instance, Lightroom here. I tend not to do so much studio work nowadays. I do a lot more work out in the field, basically. But again, what you need to do is, in every lighting condition that you're in, you need to shoot your chart. You need to shoot your color chart. And so therefore, if, for instance, I am out on location here, I'll pop the SpyderChecker into the shoot. You do need to shoot it bigger than just the checker, so you can't just focus in on that, because you need to capture in some of that lighting and ambience around what's going on in your lighting conditions, basically. But what we've got here is the opportunity to say, okay, great, I've taken a photograph of my SpyderChecker, but what I've got within Lightroom or Photoshop, well, Camera Raw, or Hasselblad Focus, I can actually capture my SpyderChecker and import that into the relevant software. Comes with the SpyderChecker. And as opposed to with the cube, where we were manually checking the white level and checking the gray level, we do start off by doing that here. But rather than having to go around and check every color on that chart there, we actually have some software that does it for you. And this, by doing this, you can suddenly create a preset, same as the sort of thing we did within Camera Raw, and works the same in Camera Raw as you already saw. But I'm going to show you here within Lightroom. So you can create a preset within the Develop module here that allows us to do basically create a preset that you can apply time and time again here. They'll appear in our user presets, if you like. So we've got some of them down here, basically. And you can patch those together. One of the benefits of working in Lightroom is the fact that you can actually, if you're creating a preset over here on the left-hand side, you can actually group those together. So if you're doing a photo shoot, you can have your morning, after, lighting, or whatever the relevant range of different lighting conditions is, or camera 1, camera 2, for instance. That can all be chunked into one folder within your user presets, and therefore essentially, as I've got here, for instance, this wedding where we got two different lighting conditions. Great, I've got those popped in together, so I'm actually able to quickly refer to those. We're not talking mega amounts of information here. They're kilobytes of information, so very, very small. It is just metadata, and that's one of the benefits of the way that Lightroom works. For instance, over, well, Photoshop, when it's working normally in a PSD environment, work in PSD, you've got to double up your file sizes, working in layers, basically, whereas here, create a new version of an image in Lightroom, and it actually only creates a representation of it, again, a kilobyte-based version of a view of it with whatever you're doing to it applied. So just to show you what we're doing here, so what we've done is we've shot it, we've cropped it down. Now, as you may recall from the slide there, you saw it was a fairly sizable device. This is actually, as you can see, it's folded out here, but when closed, it's about the size of a tablet computer, like an iPad, basically. So that sort of size, and a lot lighter, funny enough, because it's essentially two cards within a plastic container. Very, very robust plasticized cards, but and very accurately printed, so we know every one of these colors. But it does mean it's not actually the most cumbersome thing to carry around. But it is quite big, but that's for a very specific reason. If I'm doing this shot within a studio environment, maybe I'm doing groups of things, maybe I'm doing some form of scene, I need to have this big enough that I can hit from a distance. Because if I'm doing group shots, hey, there's no good this being just some sort of pocketable size of a pack of cards thing, because you're not going to be able to shoot that in the environment and then crop in and really get any decent image here with more than 1 pixel per square. So shot at created in a specific size for a reason. But what we're going to do, simple 3-stage process again. So first of all, same as we did with the joys of the SpyderCube, we're just going to take out any cast by clicking on one of our grey squares here. We advise the square E2. In fact, unfortunately, I cropped off the E and the 2 here, but that square there is square E2. So I've just set my my white point, or my grey balance, by taking out that as our grey balance point. Now all I need to do is just check what are my white levels. So that should be somewhere around 96%. So if you look at the histogram on the right-hand side, you can see the RGB values there are roughly 96 across the range there. So that's great. That's what we need. Down here, we need this to be somewhere around 4%. It's a little bit low, so it's 3.2%. I can, again, same process for highlights, adjust the exposure. For blacks, adjust the, for the shadow and adjust the blacks. So just knock that up a little bit so that it's not quite as dark there, basically. So you're getting that, it's starting to move up. Maybe we need a little bit more. At the end of the day, we'll leave it there. Yeah, it's 3.8, 3.77. So we're kind of happy with that. You can obviously play with that to your heart's content, but the key thing here is this. So open up the shot in the SpyderChecker app, and it doesn't matter whether you create a new version of it, because, as I say, those versions are only kilobyte sized, basically. So that's popped that open. What the software does is, as you saw there, it instantly tries to look for any updates, because we do like to make sure we keep you up to date with the software as far as new operating systems, etc., are concerned. And here it's popped open our image, so you can see that my friend's thumb in the background there is still clutching onto the side of this. And it doesn't have to be held, by the way. It could be lent, or in fact, once again, like the cube, it's got a little tripod mount at the bottom of the SpyderChecker, so you can actually either tripod or lighting mount it. But what we've got is the shot in the background, and what I'm moving around now in the foreground is like a representation of the the color chart, the color wheel, and essentially what those patches should be reading. So essentially, I've got my color chart there ready to go. I just need to make sure it's overlaid in the right place. So just in case you haven't shot that square on, or you've not got it quite cropped correctly, you can just move that around until you get each of those squares over the relevant one. So obviously, unless you shot it upside down, they should be the right squares. You shouldn't have to, you can't shuffle them around, basically. It's just a case of moving it from a perspective point of view so it's in the right place. Of course, another benefit of Lightroom nowadays, it does have a lens aberration and perspective adjustment tool there. So you could always shoot it and adjust it in the lens aberration tool beforehand if you hadn't got it quite square onto the camera. But you should be shooting it straight on. And in the same way that we talked about grey cards, you do need to have this 45 degrees to the incumbent light. However, there is a little trick to this. At the top of the SpyderChecker, there's a little pop-up spindle. So you can actually pop your cube, your SpyderCube on top of there, and effectively use that to take care of the setting the contrast and the white balance, and therefore the issue of where the incumbent light is coming in from. And this can just be used, shot straight onto you, and therefore you can set your color bias. But as you can see here, what we've got now is just three little options. You've got a portrait, saturation, or colorimetric environment. Effectively, what we're doing here is we're saying, right, when we click Save Calibration, as you can see there just underneath it, it's going to create a preset. And above that, in between the two, you'll see that it's got Save to Lightroom, Save to ACR, i.e. Adobe Camera Raw, Save to Focus, that's Hasselblad Focus. So essentially, you're creating those presets for those three different programs. However, you can give that color, you're setting essentially the color curve for the entire shot there. So if we don't get that color curve set correctly, well, it will be basically, but if we're shooting in a particular environment, so obviously in this instance we're going to be talking about more portrait photography or skin tones basically, because we're looking at boudoir and fashion photography. So really, if we give it a portrait bias, it's going to look at the left hand side here of the SpyderChecker. And particularly, we've got more tonality built in there for skin tones. As you can see, this lineup in particular here and here, really the pinks and the browns giving you that control over that skin tone environment. And it's using that as a slight bias. So therefore, the key thing here is if you choose a bias, colorimetric is neutral, if you like, and saturated is more for that real vibrant colors. So perhaps if you're doing something with a lot of makeup on, choose saturation. But ultimately, portraiture could be good for you if you're going to get those skin tones nice and smooth and pure there. But if you are shooting one lighting condition portrait, or for one camera with a portrait bias, shoot all of them with a portrait bias. Because what we're doing here by creating these calibrations is we're giving ourselves the adjustment we need to correct and make the colors that we're seeing true across the whole color gamut for each lighting condition or each camera. So if there was a change, if back to that classic wedding environment where you've got the inside under, perhaps neon lights in one condition, you've got outside in broad daylight in another condition, and later on maybe in halogen. Ultimately, because you've got those multiple different lighting conditions, you're going to get different casts. But what we're going to do here, by creating the correct preset for each lighting condition and applying that to the shots in each lighting condition, it will correct the colors by the relevant amount so that they all match across those lighting conditions. So if I just give this a little name here, we'll click on OK and quit here. Little nuance of Lightroom actually is the fact that actually we've got to quit when we do create a I see John is now online, so that's good. So when we do create a profile here, a preset rather, then basically what we've done here is we've actually said, okay, great, I've now got my preset correct, and but I need to actually quit Lightroom and just reboot it in order to get that popping up. So you see at the moment, actually, if I just well, a bit too late there, but you would have seen there wasn't JD1 hadn't actually been created there. But if I just pop that open again, let's just get Lightroom open again. Oof. There we go. So if I scroll down our user presets here, get to JD1 down here, you can see, in fact, if you look at the little thumbnail here, you can see as I scroll over these different presets, you can see exactly, hopefully at home, how some of those are really affecting our photo shoots there, because some of the lighting conditions obviously were very profound. You know, this was a reception I was doing a couple of weeks ago where there was a real sort of heavy red lighting condition. We were shooting it inside in one of the actually a pub before the wedding, basically. So, but here, if I just apply that JD one, you'll see. In this case, you saw how that's actually reduced down the tonality on the screen. I'll just again undo that and just apply it again. You should be able to see how that's applied that in there. And effectively, that's giving you that linearity. So now, as I say, anything that's shot in that particular lighting condition, then basically choose it and essentially apply the relevant profile in there. You're not seeing a great deal there. Let's actually scare you by showing you how this would have bleached out by applying this would have been appropriate if it had been really heavily shot in a red lighting condition. In fact, it probably might be more appropriate to that one there. So so basically there you are. You're seeing very quickly how we can adjust these colors. Now, in the background, has any sign of John being arriving? I can see his name on the list, so I'm guessing Boris. Do we have a John at this point? Fellas, anybody talking to me? Okay, maybe not. So let's wrap up whilst they figure out whether they're on mute or not. So let's look at the joys of the SpyderChecker, as I say, is a great device. Best thing in my camera bag, as you've seen, far better than my ability with a camera. But basically, what it is you can see here, it's got a flap openable front to it. So we've got it spread open at the moment, basically. But that gives us the opportunity to drop these cards, these color cards, in or out. So it does actually mean that essentially we can allow for anything that's going to fade, because that little dot there's an equivalent dot underneath the plastic rim of that side of the SpyderChecker. And if those two dots, if you do prise open the panel like we've got on the right-hand side here, and have a look in there, if the two dots are different colors, you know that you've actually been out in some very strong lighting conditions and it's faded. So essentially, okay, not a great situation, but effectively you've not faded it if it isn't the same, if it hasn't changed between those two. So that tells you when you need to change your cards, and you can get replacement cards basically for the two scenarios here. So there's the replacement cards there. You can see how they just pop in, and you can see which one should be on which side because they're cut to fit basically as far as that's concerned. Key thing there, I mean, I've had mine for what, 3 or 4 years, not changed it at all yet. No, so not seen any fading, unless you're the middle of the desert. I don't think you're going to get too much of an issue, basically. So effectively on the back of them, though, you have got a full-blown grey card. Now this is great because you can also use the SpyderChecker in video, in videography as well, basically in video capture. So if you are doing things either with DSLRs that are now capturing video, 5D being a classic example, then effectively you've now got the opportunity to use this as a opening frame within the video side of things. So I can set my gray point for video as well, and in this case much bigger. So therefore, working with video cameras and full frame video cameras, you've got that opportunity to do that. The SpyderChecker, the actual chart side of things, that side, effectively can be used by things like Blackmagic Resolve as a comparison chart, basically. So you can set your entire color setup for calibrate your color setup for anything you're doing in your video settings, again, to get that color correct in video as well, just the same way as we've been talking about in Lightroom, just a different application there being used for that. So there's the two subtle differences there. Now I have to say, a bit of a promo for one of our friends, our other OEM companies here. It's a Lightroom Photoshop. Don't forget, if you're not aware, they're doing a great bundle now called the Photographer's Bundle. It's in pounds, $8.78 a month, and with that you get Photoshop, Lightroom, and a few other bits and pieces in there that really keeps you up to date. It's your latest versions of the software, and there's some cracking stuff in Photoshop and in Lightroom now. As I say, Lightroom I really do find indispensable nowadays, in particular since my old product Aperture seems to be disappearing from anybody's inbox nowadays, or and on their Macs if you happen to be on a Mac. So let's quickly pop out of here before I get into anything further and just say, okay, so this has been the sort of the capture end of things that we'd be referring to in our boudoir, our environment for any sort of studio-based photography. And let's quickly ask the question of either Boris or John. John, hello.
Rich, it's me.
Hello, mate.
Sorry. Now you can share your screen again. I'm sorry, I clicked the wrong button, but I have good message. John is in, and he
He
can
is.
take over. Yeah.
Oh, well, there we go, folks. The man of the moment. We've been waiting for him
Sorry,
for
but
a while,
it
then.
was worse to have this
Can you
interruption.
hear me, Mother? Can you hear me?
I can hear you, John. Dear me, that's been delightful having the joys of keeping our lovely audience hopefully entertained. Well, we haven't lost anybody, so that's a good sign. But
I hope.
apologies once again, audience. You've obviously had the back end of things there, but hopefully that's been useful for you anyway.
Yeah.
Let's hand over to John now. Let's hand over
One
the
second, one second.
screen
I'll have
control.
to upgrade him again. 1 second, please.
Okay. John, don't go anywhere, mate. You are now organising, as they say.
Yeah,
But,
and okay, Rich, I haven't seen at what point you have been of your presentation.
I've just literally
stage.
got to the end of the capture side of things. So we've told the guys and girls all about the joys of how to set up your studio correctly on the capture end of
Okay,
things.
so you are going to share
hopefully
your
that's
screen.
been useful.
Yeah, you're going to share your screen with us for a few more seconds. Or
I'm
shall
already
we just...
sharing it, I believe. So
I don't
I'm
know.
ready for John to take over if you want. I mean, I want.
Okay,
I'm
that's
ready
great.
for John. If
Okay.
John, you ready?
I'm ready when you are.
Cool.
Okay.
John, you go, boy.
So I will
Okay, mate.
promote you, John, now to be the moderator. And now you can share your screen with us. Sorry, that's the live situation, but...
Okay then, folks. Can everybody see what's happening on my screen?
Yeah, everything. You're up and running. Perfect.
Woohoo! Thank you for your patience, folks. This has been a crisis beyond a crisis. You have no idea of the sweat that's been extended across multinational boundaries. You have no idea of the running up and down. I'm now working on my son's laptop with all sorts of things going off. So technical challenges, but hey, thanks for your patience and waiting for us. We'll try and make it worth your while. So this is me. For anybody who doesn't know me, get ready for a shock, because that's the face that you're listening to. If you ever see that face again, then the question of would you like a Guinness or a Stella is always desirable, and the answer will usually be yes, and I'm happy to stand and talk photography with anybody. So welcome. Who is it that's talking to you? Well, my name's John. I'm a full-time photographer based in the East Riding of Yorkshire in a beautiful little village called Bishop Burton. Since turning full-time professional about 10 years ago, I've changed the way my business operates, so that I now work in the areas of art nude, fashion, bridal, and boudoir photography. I do that for private clients, but I also do a lot of teaching. I teach lighting, directing, posing, post-production, and it's wonderful because that takes me all over the world. I do that alongside the societies, the SWPP, and Ellincrom. Ellincrom have been a fantastic partner and took us out to Taiwan earlier in the year, which was just one of the best photographic experiences of my life up until this evening, obviously. We had a lot of fun over there, met some beautiful people, and you never know, some of them might actually be logged in to the webinar this evening. But what it's all about is really looking at the what, the who, and the how of what we do in the world of boudoir and fashion. So what is boudoir and fashion, really? Well, it's a very broad church. Lots of people shoot boudoir, lots of people shoot in fashion styling, and they do it very differently. My definition is the one I work to, and that's the only one I can. And for me, boudoir is all about bringing out the best of the female form and empowering that individual to feel better about themselves. We have boudoir clients who tend to be more in their 30s, 40s, 50s, rather than the models that we use who are all in their 20s. And it's a great, great feeling to see a woman come into my studio, quite shy, perhaps being beaten up by life, feeling that their body's not their best feature. and yet by the end of it, we've made them look good, but feel good, and they have a record of that through their pictures. So boudoir for me encompasses elements of lingerie and nude and fashion photography, and that's really what we're going to explore tonight. Fashion, well, fashion can be anything. Fashion can be what you want it to be. Rather than the term fashion, I just think of funky portraiture. I've never explored the world of high fashion. I've never wanted to go off to London and make millions by touting myself around the various magazines, bits and pieces. I enjoy putting a little bit of funk into my imagery, and again, hopefully I succeed in that. You'll be the judge. So who do I shoot? Well, as I say, a lot of my clients, private clients, tend to be older, wanting to feel good about themselves. But in the main, I try and work with models when I'm doing my presentations, and I work with a small team of regular models. But the thing is, with them, they're not models when they first come to me. I tend to look around Facebook, and I use Facebook as a great marketing tool. I tend to look at places like modelmayhem.com, PureStorm, Purpleports, all the various online portfolio websites, and have a look about who's active in my area. But what I'm really looking for is potential in a model. I don't want somebody who's already well experienced and will do everything that they think you want. I want raw, new talent that we can work with, that we can help grow, and it's been fantastic to be able to launch some great modelling careers and also have a well-established team that work with us all over the world. So that's for who. Go out though and find people in your own locality, because there's nothing like having a muse at the end of the telephone line that you could give a call to and say, hey, how do you fancy a shoot tomorrow? And Liz, my wife, and I are very adept at stalking our local town. We carry a pocket full of business cards, and the best approach we've ever found is not to go up to somebody and go, hello, you're gorgeous. Would you like to come and have some pictures taken? Because that doesn't tend to work very well. What we do is we just give them a business card and say, we're up in the market, we're looking to update our portfolio, shoot some images. If you're interested, have a look at my website and then get back to me. And that way, they get to make a choice. They get to look through all the pictures and make a judgment call of whether they want to do nudes, whether they want to do lingerie, whether they want to do swimwear, whatever their boundaries are, and they'll give you a call back if they're interested. And that way, you're not having to sell to them. They've sold to themselves. And we've got some of our best talent through that sort of approach. The how boils down to using a fair amount of lighting for me. I started off being a natural light photographer, perhaps like many of us, because flash terrified me and I didn't know what I was going to do with it. I've moderated that approach to using small flashes. Now I use any of the Elinchrom range I can get my hands on, but principally the Elinchrom Quadra Ranger sets and the brand new ELC Pro HD lights, which offer an absolutely stunning quality of light, but they're studio-based. The Quadras go with me everywhere, whether I'm on a location on a beach somewhere abroad or doing a wedding, then those Quadras are my main lighting source of choice. So rather than waffling, I thought what I'll do is go through a set of images, talk you through some of the approaches to them, and hopefully that'll give you a few ideas along the way. I know we're going to be running late. I'm here for you guys now. Let's say you'll never understand the tension that has been running around this place trying to get this webinar up and running, but now I'm here. I'm all yours for the duration. There will be a question and answer session at the end of it, and that will go on either on here or on Facebook later, however long you want. So totally immersed for you. Make a note of your questions, send them through, and we'll try and answer everything as we go. So first question, images. Looking at a little bit of boudoir, this was part of the image that was used to promote this event, and it's of Jodie, one of our newest models. This is only on our second shoot ever. Now, a lot of people ask me, where do you get your inspirations from? Well, this was actually inspired by a shoot of Marilyn Monroe. I think it was the last one she did before she died, and there's lots of images are online, and she was just messing about with a piece of fabric and strongly backlit from behind, and so I used that as my inspiration, and we shot a few different varieties on this style. We went to full length, moved the lights around slightly to get that more implied nude look. This is a great set of and style of shooting for a client perhaps who isn't as body confident, because for all they're being quite suggestive with these, nothing is actually revealed. And what you see down the back of her is that the shape and definition of her backside is actually being bleached out by the lighting, and so that's trimming the shape down. So if you had a larger proportion client and you were looking to trim elements off, then it's a great lighting style to do it with. And how did we do it? What was the light placement? Well, I prepared this stunning diagram that will show you an exact replica of the lighting setup. There you go. That's one of my best artistic pieces. What you see is two Ellincrum strip boxes, one either side of the client, wedged, turned slightly in towards the white wall behind her, because it's actually the light bouncing off that wall that's coming back into the lens and wrapping around her slightly to get the look that we require. And you'll see there they're just moving Jodie backwards and forwards a little bit. Here she stood quite forward of the lights. There she stood more in the middle, and they're really bleaching her out and creating the soft, sort of milky light reflecting in the lens sort of look that we wanted. Now, if we had a massive light bank, then I could have placed that behind her and pushed light that way, but I don't. I didn't have a big window, so I couldn't do that. But what we did have is about a 6 foot by 4 foot square of wall. Put her in there, and it's amazing the looks you can create with a bit of creative lighting. So that's a boudoir type set that we do a lot of times with clients, with models, because it gives them that confidence of having a prop to hide behind. They can be totally covered up, and yet they're actually stood naked in the studio and feeling quite vulnerable perhaps, but it's a good way to launch them into the entire shoot and overcome any inhibitions. But for all we do a lot of work in the studio, we do a lot of work out of it as well. And natural light in its purest forms just can't be beaten. So given that it's the summer over here in England, although you won't believe it today, up in East Yorkshire, it's been cold, windy and chucking it down. But hey, that's the joys of living in the UK. But natural light is a great friend to us, and I always start off my shoots, no matter whether it's with a client or a model, with some natural light headshots. And here we are with Alex this time, and going then into a couple more of Jodie, where we're just sat in the doorway of a barn on the studio. My studio's on a farm, so we've got a lot of room to play around. And this is just a large open doorway into a barn, and the great light it generates with a reflector laid on the floor. Just push that light back in under the chin into the eye sockets, and you see the great looks that you can create just by dancing around your subject. All these are shot at f2.8 on a 70-200 lens, or 85mm lens opened up to 1.4 to give that stunning shallow depth of field. That means you focus on the eye and the rest of it goes into is blurred out. Here we see the actual setup. Here we've got Darren, who was with us on one-to-one day a couple of weeks ago, and this is the shooting area. You'll see here that there's file machinery in the background. There's various bits of stuff in the background, but because our subject, in this instance Jodie, is so much brighter than the background, then we get the background going black behind her, and so natural light gives us a lot of possibilities to produce great pictures. So never discount it. If you haven't got a studio space or you're feeling a bit limited by your lighting, strip it back to basics. Go to natural light and you'll have a lot of fun. Another natural light setup, and again using this soft muted light. This was taken under a road bridge on the approach to Hull. Now, Hull isn't renowned as a scenic hotspot, but there's some fantastic lights and some fantastic areas to shoot in. And under this motorway bridge, you get a very soft form of light that bounces around off all the concrete, giving a nice, crisp, clear light. And I absolutely love it as a location to shoot in, whether it's hot and sunny, or in this case it was a bit colder and a bit rainier, and we had a great time just shooting pictures under there. Incidentally, I will give you some addresses at the end for my website and my blog. You'll be able to see loads more of these images on there, and there's also some breakdowns on my forum that I run. We call them Light Monkeys. That's available on www.johndentontraining.com /light monkeys. It's free to register. Join up with that gang and you get a lot of behind the scenes pictures, lighting setups and bits and pieces like this. So natural light, fantastic. Doesn't have to be just headshots. Here we see a full length of Jodie. I also use natural light a lot for my bridal stuff, and bridal photography doesn't have to lack that funky edge. Here we have Alex again. We were getting ready to do a bridal's boudoir seminar, which incorporated elements of funky photography in weddings and also the boudoir bits. And one of the pleasures for me of shooting with a bride is moments I spend with her, just with a veil on, just with a bit of jewellery on, just when her hair and makeup's perfect, and having that chance to play around and get some fantastic little headshots that really make her come alive. And it's always a great way to start the bridal session, just by playing around with the veil and having a mess about. Again, it doesn't have to cost you a fortune if you're looking to put props together for your studio. The tiara was made for us by a friend. The necklace is a Primark special that costs about £2.50, I believe. And the veil we got from a charity shop. So it's been pre-loved, pre-used, and it's certainly been used to death by us. We just get about one veil, one dress a year from the charity shops, and they tend to last us. So getting your props together for your own studio is a great way of just being able to experiment and get some beautiful images. But you see here, from the catch light in the eyes, that we've got exactly the same lighting setup, a large doorway providing the light onto Alex, and just a reflector on the floor here, just bouncing light back in, and it's always a silver reflector. For me, the only time I'd use a golden reflector is out on a beach, but a silver reflector gives nice crispness, nice intensity to the skin tones, and I really love the way the silver renders on skin tone, whether I'm shooting brides, fashions, or nudes, whatever. Let's have a look and move on. I said that we were talking about boudoir. Well, this was on a bridal boudoir workshop, and you see here that a lot of my brides do a boudoir shoot. A lot of my brides will do that before the wedding day as a gift to their partner-to-be, and it's a great way of breaking the ice, because certainly on a wedding day, if I spent time with them in their lingerie or naked, then there's no inhibitions about them posing on the wedding day. Classic pose, if you like, just head over the edge of the bed, looking back into the light. You've got window light behind me, and we're just using that to shoot Alex. Now, it's a very dark room here. We're shooting at 1600 ISO on a Nikon D300, so it's not the best image quality, but as a series of images, absolutely fantastic. Window light with a lamp turned on the desk that she's sat on. The lamp's providing that nice little cast along the back wall and the little fringe of light on her shoulder, and the window light is flooding in on her and giving that nice moulding down the V of the cheek here, little catch lights in the eyes, and also we've still got the shadow running down the jawline. We get a lot of our clients do nudes, but they don't have to be showing everything, so we can be quite discreet with nudity. And here we have Alex in a pose that we do a lot if we're shooting in a hotel room, just using one of the nice chairs that's available and getting that nice, wistful, romantic, someday my prince will come type of look as she gazes out of the window. Some of my best improvised shots have been taken in bathrooms. Why? Because sometimes when I'm doing those natural light headshots at the start and just veil, you can't always find a nice doorway. But if somebody's got a big white bathtub in perhaps a white tiled bathroom, so there's a lot of light bouncing around in there, then I have sat brides in bathtubs before and just taken those headshots, because the bathtub acts as a natural reflector. So always look for the light. Here we had Alex in repose, looking like she was just taking a bath and just shooting through the doorway for a funky little boudoir type shot that again would be part of a client's album if they were buying one. And the classic lingerie getting ready shot, adjusting the stocking top, window light flooding in from here and filling the room, and just positioning Alex so she was catching the edge of that. Back to Jodie now, and a different use of natural light, but also when you're shooting fashion, it's making the look fit the light and fit the location. Now this is a grain silo. It stores dried grain in the farm. And it's quite a gritty, urban-looking environment, and so we wanted quite a gritty, urban look from Jodie, and I thought then that by pushing the black and white finish would suit that sort of look. The jeans, well, we wanted her to look like a real funky rock chick that didn't care about life, and so simple things like undoing the top buttons just gives a different look to if they were tight and done up. This is suggesting a real devil-may-care attitude, as is the connection with the camera through the eyes, and the straps off the shoulders, and a little bit of attitude of what are you looking at as she grabs hold of the top. Again, once you get one image, you can shoot for a little series of those, working around your subject. Now the finishing here is done in Nik software. It's using the Silver FX Pro, and that's a program that I like for doing my black and white toning. But just because we've shot a few black and whites doesn't mean that we can't use colour as well, because if you get good, strong, natural light, and there's no flash and no reflector really used here, this is just the natural light, and it's just gorgeous and pure and beautiful. Now, colour is the reason that I started working alongside Rich and the guys from Data Color, because one of the first investments I made when I went professional was a colour spider, the thing that sits on the front of your screen and calibrates whether what you're seeing is what you think you're seeing. So it projects a square of red, and if it's seeing something that's slightly pink, it will correct your screen for you, so what you're seeing is absolutely pure red. That means that if I sent this image off to my printers now, I would be assured of getting back an image that looked like this one, rather than some of the duller tones or weird colours that I was getting when I first started and didn't understand the necessity of colour calibration. So a colour calibrator, the Spyder Pro, has been a part of my workflow for the last 10 years, and it's saved me so much money. It's untrue, and that's why I'm happy to be talking to you tonight on behalf of the guys from Data Color, because I really advocate the work they do, as I'm sure Rich hopefully explained a lot of the work he did as he was sweating and trying to get a fill while we were messing about with the technology. But yeah, beautiful natural light.
I'm just used to rambling on, John. It didn't make any odds to me.
It's amazing the skills you develop when you need to.
Indeed, yeah. Nice mention for Nik software there as well, mate. Well done.
Thank you. A little bit of cross-lighting here. When we're shooting bodies, we want to really cross-light people a lot of the time, so we're getting light and shade, light and shade. Now, I've mentioned a few times about doing nude photography. We're not actually showing nudes today, but if you get any chance to do a nude workshop, if you haven't already in your career, do it this year. You will make a heck of a difference to the way your imagery and your ability to pose and direct people, because you will start to understand how light can change shape and alter shape. And here we have Abby posed against just a wooden door. The light source is over here, over to the right, and the light is just coming through a doorway, so I've turned the face into the light and just got that light skidding across her body, and a little reflector jammed in here just to bounce a little light back, and you see the way it's picking up on the strands of hair. So cross lighting can really help you show form and depth. But sometimes, such as on this shoot with Jodie, we were out in a field. Out in the middle of the field, we had nowhere to hide, and the sun is coming through the clouds, so it's still quite muted. It's not blowing out, it's not massively hot sunlight, but it's just coming through the clouds behind her. And so what I did is meet her for this area here, getting this properly exposed, which means the skin tone will be properly exposed. We may lose some detail in the hair, we may blow out the light on the shoulders, but as long as I've got her square to the sunlight, what you get is just a little bit of blowing out around the fringes of her, but with beautiful soft light across the face, which really helps to capture her expression. The background is nice and diffuse because I'm shooting at 2.8 on a 200mm lens, and the sky has gone pretty much perfectly white because we're really blowing it out. By shooting in tight, we're really capturing expression. So just because we're shooting the fashion or boudoir, get used to playing around, changing your angle, getting in tight, coming out wide, using a bit of framing that perhaps you wouldn't do on a bridal shoot, putting the subject over to one side of the frame, letting her look into this negative space, so the eye line just journeys out of the frame on this side, and it's nice that the hedgerow in the background sort of directs you that way too, so it's echoing the line that you're looking. As a photographer, a lot of the time you're looking to give the viewer of the image clues as to what they should be looking at. It's like the old painters of years gone by. It's worth a trip to the National Art Galleries to have a look at the way that the old masters used to be able to direct you around a frame just by putting little patterns of light, leading lines, putting little dabs of eye lines of their subjects, the way these subjects connected with each other, either through hands, feet, or just looking through gazes. And you learn a lot by studying the art of old, not just the contemporary art. Okay, we've gone from soft light to quite hard sunlight here. In fact, very hard sunlight. The clue is in the fact that Jodie is closing her eyes because it's absolutely burning into her eye sockets if she turned her face this way. What I wanted her to do was use the hat to just shade her eyes a little bit, and that's given that nice interesting little pattern across here and across the chest. But the hard sunlight is what's really bouncing in on her, giving that pattern on the backdrop and giving a nice interesting look to the image. Hard sunlight again. She stood just in full sun. I've let her wear her sunglasses. Now, is this a fashion shot or is it a boudoir shot? Because it's, after all, a lady in her pants with a shirt barely on, stood against a wall. Does it class as boudoir? Does it class as fashion? I don't mind. It can be either for me. What it is funky. And if a client is willing to do this sort of look on a boudoir day, then they can do it. And then it's just changing around the pose, having a dance with your clients in some ways, so that you get all sorts of different looks, and then playing with the toning afterwards. So hard sunlight can be your absolute friend if you're prepared to work with it. Here is a different sort of boudoir shot. I mentioned that we have barns around the studio, and in the ceiling of the barn there is a slatted window, and it's the light coming through those slats that makes this zebra pattern across the floor of the barn when the sun is out. I positioned Jodie so that certain elements of her body lit, certain elements have gone to shade, and what I'm exposing for here is these very brightest parts. I want those to be properly exposed, let the shadows go deep and rich and intense, and then play around with the pose to get the different looks. And here, really, it's just this one eye that was being caught by the light, and that's what I wanted to guide you into the image and then follow off down the length of the body shape. And if you can find a model like Jodie, who is actually a bit of a nutter and is quite prepared to crawl across a dusty barn floor, then you've got a winner for her starters. So that's the type of muse that we look for. Here's Jodie again in hot sunlight. Now, it's a wonder she ever came back to me for another shoot after this, because we've virtually killed her eyes on this one. But what I did here is not just use the hot sunlight, but actually double it up by putting a beauty dish in, and we see the reflection in the glasses, to boost the light and deepen the shadows. So I've got a Elinchrom Quadra Ranger firing into a beauty dish at full power, which is giving me about an F18, F22 on Jodie, slightly underexposing the actual sunlight. I think the sunlight was coming through at F18, I took it to F22, and that's what's giving this beautiful modelling across her features and the dark shadows. And again, just in case there was any doubt, here's the fantastic lighting setup to show you how those were taken. You'll see the beauty dish over to the left, the sun coming in from the right, me getting the sun on the back of my head, and then the metal shutter behind, acting as a reflector, acting as a backdrop, and performing a variety of effects to get the look that we wanted. Okay, we saw the hat earlier, and here's the hat being used with hot sunlight and also with that same beauty dish. Now, if I'd have just put Jodie looking into the hot sunlight, it would have killed her eyes. She wouldn't have been able to give me this soft, sultry expression that I wanted. And so I positioned the beauty dish over to the camera right, so it is actually blocking the light from the sunshine on Jodie's face. I then powered it up to match the power of the sun, which again was giving me about an F18. Oops, just go back to that image. See, technology's out to get us today. It's given me about an f/18, so I matched the power of the flash to the power of the sunshine. So it's actually the flash that's shining through the hat and giving me these beautiful patterns across the face, and the catchlight in the eye there, and the sculpting across the body. And then by the time it reaches down here, we see the sunshine again starting to join the gang and have its impact. So sometimes just blocking out the sun can give you the effect, as long as you put some flash in to balance it up. Now this is most definitely a fashion image, making best use of an area that perhaps you wouldn't normally shoot in. This is just a corner of the farmyard where old things go to die. And you see here there's a couple of pallets, there's the edge of a skip, there's last year's Christmas tree, and a few bits of random metal that tend to appear on farmyards, and a big concrete wall. Now the sun is again at really hot day now, and the sun is coming right over the top of this wall, and it's the sunshine that's hitting Jodie on the top of the head. The beauty dish is over to camera left, and it's the beauty dish that's then lighting Jodie up. Sorry, camera right is the beauty dish. You can tell from the shadows here, shadow coming off the hand here, and it's those that are creating the look on Jodie, lighting her up with the sunshine coming over and doing its magic around here. So mixing and matching your light sources, being prepared to look at an area and try and get the best potential out of it. Here we've got quite a grungy, horrible looking area, to be fair, that a lot of photographers probably wouldn't bother with, but because we've got quite a grungy look, quite an attitude look, then I thought that suited it. And the toning, I wanted it to look like a sunny day in a kind of vintage look, so it all came together nicely. Now I use flash a lot in the great outdoors to underexpose things. I underexpose the sky and then use a flash to light the subject. So here is a typical shot that I do, taking a meter reading of the sky, which was giving me f/16, underexposing that to f/22, and then using my flash to light up my subject, Abby in this case, looking fantastic, stood on a wall outside the studio, and again, getting a very funky sort of look. Okay, so underexposed skies can give you a lot of drama in your shots. I certainly like a lot of drama in my shots. And here we have one of the favourite images I took last year. This was taken of Della up in the Lake District. We were running a residential course for the societies, the SWPP, and that was runs up in the Lake District. And we had the most fantastic light after a rainstorm. It had been horrendous all day. We hadn't been able to get outside, and yet the light just broke towards the end of the day. And you see the way the clouds are separating in the background. We had this most beautiful tree that was in its autumn colours, and matching that to Della's dress, and exposing really for the sky and the background colours. We got a lot of detail in the background colour, and then just popping a bit of flash in on Della at the same level as the light in the background. So from memory, this was giving me about an f/11, and I metered the flash to f/11 so that she just pinged out from there, and the way the colours came together was just fantastic. Now I could have taken that to f/22, but the trouble is, all this would then have been dark. There would have been no detail in this background area. There would have been a lot of detail in the sky, but there's always a balance to be done. And if you don't want to use neutral grad filters and all that sort of thing when you're shooting, which I don't, I'm a very free and easy shooter, then I prefer to sacrifice some detail in the sky to keep the detail in down here, and then just use flash on Della to make her ping out from the backdrop. And I just love the colour balance in that one. Again, when you're shooting for fashion, then colour can be your friend. If you're shooting absolute fashion for a magazine or for a release of a clothes company or something like that, for the new springwear collection, then the colour checkers come into their absolute own, because you can confirm right there on location that you're shooting the absolute true colour. Now, a lot of time when I'm shooting, I don't need true colour at the time of shooting, but I do when I present that image for print out of the web. And so that's where the whole range of data color products come into their own, because I use the lens cal to make sure my lens is sharp. I use a color checker if I need absolute color, but the main one I use is the Spyder Pro to make sure that the colors on my screen are exact. Okay, moving into the studio now. Now, this is Devon, and we looked at, when we first started this session, at using natural light on headshots. Well, here in the studio, we've had to go a little bit further to get that same look that really we were getting in the doorway. You'll see the double catch lights in her eyes. We've got a beauty dish from above, angled down at Devon, and a little reflector in, bouncing the light back under her chin. That's given us that same soft, gorgeous light around her features that we were getting in the doorway. But because it was raining this day, we had to do it in the studio. One of the things I like to do, even when I'm taking static images, is put some movement into them. A little movement makes for a much more dynamic image than perhaps just the static expression. And you'll see here, her eyes just look a little bit intense. This is one of her first ever shoots, and she's looking perhaps a little bit startled down the camera. But you get that movement and that fun into the shoot, and suddenly you got that little twinkle in the eyes, and the whole energy of the hair just wafting across the face gives to the picture. So I do like to get that energy going in the studio. But light placement is everything. I'm just going to run you through a little demonstration. This was from a digital imaging roadshow that we did up in Newcastle with the societies and the Flash Centre. And here we have Della looking fab with just one flash. And this is perhaps the usual starting point for most one flash pictures. The flash is about 45 degrees off from Della and over to camera left, as we can see, because the light's flooding across this broad side of her face, hitting the nose. We've got that nose shadow coming down here, and the light just coming across the cheek, giving the little V across the cheek here, and the catch light in the eyes is that giveaway as to where that light has been placed. Soft light, I think we were using a strip box on these, and it's nice portrait, but we could perhaps put a little bit more funk in to the image just by changing the light placement. So here we've got the same light at the same settings, and all I've done is turn Della to face my camera left, put the flash behind her slightly, and angled it back towards the camera. What that's doing is making the light hit the edge of the nose here, just drift across to give the strip down the cheek, the little catch lights in the eyes, and it's that beautiful rim lit effect. This is a shot I do a lot in boudoir shoots and maternity shoots and the like, using rim lighting to put a little bit of emphasis onto perhaps a breast or a backside or a maternity bump or people's faces in this instance. And it's a beautiful killer shot that once you've nailed it, you'll be able to repeat time after time after time, and it doesn't half impress clients. And in boudoir terms, it's always been our best seller as a rim lit shot of a body or a backside, and people love it because it's almost anonymous. It's making it into an abstract piece of art. Instead of being at the back of her and angled back to the camera now, I've moved that flash right round to the same axis as Della and just pointing at her. And what we see now is we've created that split light pattern, that the light's hitting the front of her body, but hitting her nose and not skidding across it too much, just picking out the eye with a little catch light on that side. Again, it's the same outfit, it's the same light, same settings on the camera, same power output from the light. All we're doing is moving it around, having that little dance with our subject to get different looks from that one light source. Here we have variation on the rim lighting effect. Normally, I'd have the light on the same side as me. This time, the light is on the far side of Della, pointing back towards me. And that way, it's almost like the rim light shot, but it's skidding across her body, not falling into this area here. So this area is pretty much in darkness, and then just giving a little bit of light on the wall here. We were working in a very, very small space to do this session, and yet it shows that with that little bit of creativity and that little bit of improvisation, you can do a whole range of looks. So never feel totally stunted. If you're only working in a small studio or an area of your own house, then it's experimenting, trying different looks that will that will really push your photography forward. Here we use the light as a backdrop. So this is the softbox here, the white area, and it's just firing back across Della. Again, we see the light drifting across the edge of the nose, giving a little V shape of light down here, and the catch lights in the eyes again with a giveaway as to where the light's actually coming from. But this gives you a nice high key background and a light source just off that one light. I said before that I liked a bit of movement in my shot. This is another variation on the one light above, reflector below, and in this case we actually had Eddie, a volunteer, wafting the reflector to get the movement in her hair. If you haven't got a wind machine, then improvise, and a volunteer from the audience is a great starting point for that. Okay, cheeky little bit of bridal boudoir here. I said that a lot of my clients do a boudoir shoot, and again, if somebody's feeling quite reserved and doesn't want to reveal too much of their body, then just some white underwear with the veil, with a fake flower in this instance, just gives a nice, gentle type of a look to the image. And here we've just got one light source again. It's a softbox up high, angled down at Alex, light flooding across the front of her here, and just wrapping around her body slightly. To highlight the edge of the veil. And I think that was done with an octabox, a deep octa, which gives that beautiful soft light all around her. If you're in a studio and you don't have the space to expand outwards, then something like these backdrops can be worth their weight in gold. Now these are actually vinyl backdrops that we get through Click Props, and they've got us out of jail free on a number of occasions. We don't always have access to a stately home, but we can put up a little wall that gives that suggestion of it and then use it accordingly. Here we have Abby in an underwear set, and if I'd have just had her stood perhaps on the wall where she was before in the blue dress, it would have looked a little bit weird. But because the colour balances match, because the setting seems appropriate, then underwear comes into its own. Now we have two lights working in this setup, one coming from this side, it's the big strip box again, and another just giving a little bit of lift from this side here. Same model, different pose, different backdrop. See how I said before that making the attitude, making the outfit fit the setting is what can give funk to your pictures. As well as getting the lighting right, it's getting the setting right. So we went for the urban graffiti here, made her look like an urban graffiti chick in the jeans and scooped halter neck top, and the attitude then comes from the pose with one rim light hitting the side of her here and a slightly harder light source hitting the top. Same lighting for Alex, and here she is jumping for joy and using the Union Jack. That was around the time of the Jubilee celebrations. Different look with Jodie, but the same lighting setup. One light from the back, one light from the front, giving definition to the body shape. Again, nothing revealed. Very nice and easy pose, lots of people to do, but a great shot that's very sultry, quite sexy. The backdrop suits the image. Okay, we've talked a lot about soft light. One of the things I do like to use in the studio is very hard light. Now this is the Elinchron Maxi Light, which is basically a metal bucket that you stick on the front of your flash, whether it be a Quadra or whatever the flash you've got, and just fire it directly at the subject. You'll see it gives this hard shadow behind her, which is almost effectively doubling the size of her body shape, but it's a look that I love and I do a lot with my clients because you can do it in a very small space, and if you wanted to later in Photoshop, you can extend this canvas to make it look like it's in a much bigger white space than is perhaps the actual reality. Same sort of setup, but with a slightly less hard light source. You'll see here that the shadow is there, but it's slightly softened, and that suits this sultry look from Alex there. I think the modifier in this instance was the 70cm octa again, with the front layer of diffusion pulled off, so you just have the inner baffle in there of silk, just to push the light through, softening it slightly, still giving a shadow, but a less harsh shadow than with the maxi light. But it's the same white wall, same limited space, but getting lots of different looks from it. Okay, Alex again, just against white wall, would you believe? But because she stood forward from the white wall and we've limited the spill onto it, then we're getting a nice grey look behind. The light from the back here is just flaring into the lens slightly. That needs to be corrected for perfection. But one light coming in from above, that's the maxi light again, giving that quite hard light pattern down here, light around the jawline, and the strip box from the back giving rear illumination. And just because this is the classical main light from the camera right, there's no harm in just turning away from that main light if you're shooting for fashion. Because if you open the pages of Vogue, if you open the pages of any magazine, you'll see lots of rules, classical rules of photography being broken. Now, is that perfectly lit? No. In purist terms, it's horribly lit. Is it a beautiful image that a client would like? Yes, it is. Is it one that I like? Yes, it is. And so when people ask me, who do you shoot for? Who do you worship as a photographer? Who do you get inspired by? There's only one person, and that's me. It may sound arrogant because, yes, I get lots of ideas from lots of photographers all around the world, but there's only one person I can possibly shoot for, and that's me. Because if I'm satisfying my creative soul, then that's the way I'm going to be happy as a person and develop as an artist. One of my favourite looks, a single light source high above Jodie. There she is, sat on a coffee table covered by a black cloth, would you believe, in the studio, well away from the walls, so we've got no spill going onto them, and above her is a strip box with a egg crate grid attached to it on a boom arm, just pushing that light down and giving great definition and shape to her body. Again, there's a lot more of these on the forum and some on the blog, so feel free to join us on the Light Monkeys and on the blog, and you'll see a lot more images from these shoots. Now, pretty much all the stuff I've been looking at so far is a one light setup. Here we have a one flash, one reflector, two flash, three flash, and behind a four flash extravaganza. I have a big softbox behind Della's head. I have a small reflector dish here, giving this little light down the side of the cheekbone here. I have another doing the same job on this side. These two are firing in at the same power. This, the one behind, is at full power to really push light around her and give this milky look all around her. I've got a beauty dish in from the front, angled down, giving this light across the mask of the face, and the reflector just bouncing any random light back in there just to lift the shadows. But I love the way, by balancing all the apertures and power outputs, you still get cheekbone definition, shadowing around the nose, and that beautiful light in the eyes. Finally, a little Marmite type of flash. It's one that I use a fair amount. It would be easy to overdo it, but it's for ring flash, and it's a look that some people love, some people hate. I'm a fan. The models aren't usually, because it can kill their eyes, but what I love is this virtually shadowless light with just a little grey rim shadow around the edge of the subject, that perfectly round catchlights in their eyes, and whether you're using the Elinchroms, like me, this is the Elincrom Echo ring flash, or even if you've got a speed light and using one of the various ring flash modifiers, you can get beautiful, beautiful light for a very funky looking fashion portrait, and a lot of people will recognise the light having seen it on America's Next Top Model or in various magazines. So for Jodie, just against a white wall, just rocking some looks. Out in the barn, we can still use it even if from location, because I'm further back here. Look how that shadow's just extended around her like a little corona. And again, this is something that some people like, some people don't. I do like it. I think it really works. The one thing you've got to watch for is red eye. Because the lens is poking through the middle of the ring flash, you're pushing light straight on the same axis as the subject, and so you can often get some red eye bouncing back. And here's Devon, just out in the open, against the same steel door we shot Jodie in the black dress against, and that ring flash really working its magic outdoors to give a very funky look. So that's a whistle-stop tour to my world of lighting. We've got various upcoming events if you'd want to join us. If you're over in Ireland, then we're coming to Ireland. We've got a residential session with the societies down in Bath, which will be fun. And our Portuguese safari is a highlight of the show, of our year every year, and there's still places if you want to come join us on that. You can find all those details on johndentontraining.com, and if nothing else, I hope to see you at least one of the shows that we're going to be doing, either the Digital Imaging Show in Birmingham or the SWP convention.
Cool.
I mentioned... Go on.
Sorry, John. I thought you were wrapping up there, and you've got more slideware. Sorry.
That's okay. So just mentioned before about keeping in touch. If you've got any questions that don't go answered today, you can always email me. That's the website. That's my blog. That's the forum. Note that Light Monkeys has to be an uppercase L, uppercase M, but it's free to register, and there's a lot of information on there. You can follow me on Twitter or on Facebook. Thanks to everybody who supported this, not least, of course, Datacolor, who've given us a hosting, Ellincrum, who do my lighting, the societies, who have given me a platform to talk to the world, and I absolutely love it. But what I do love is that photography has brought me in touch with some beautiful people. The models are fantastic, the photographers even more so. And if you do any tweets or Facebook follows up after this session, if you wouldn't mind including this hashtag, I would be deeply appreciative, as my mate Roger's doing it very tough at the moment. He's not in a good way, and it's about the only thing we can do to show him some support. So I'm going to wrap up now. I think it's question time, but cheers all. Thanks for listening.